Hey everybody, this is Dr. Hines. I am sending you the promised video regarding our differentiated lesson plan. So just as an aside, sorry, last week was just unbelievably crazy for me. I was in a school system all day on Tuesday, and leading up to that, having to prepare an 8-hour workshop. So then I got home and had to kind of come out from under that and catch up on emails and so forth. So I didn't have a chance to do this, but we still have time. You have a couple more weeks to work on your differentiated lesson plan. So what I wanted to do is just kind of go through the assignment, kind of talk through some things that I have found typical over the years, questions that people have had, things I want to point your attention to so that you can do the best job that you can. So what you're going to be doing as we've come through these weeks, we have been looking at different topics associated with differentiated instruction. And so hopefully you're gaining momentum and insight into some of the different pieces and components. We began talking about how do we define differentiation, what are some of the principles, what's some of the rationale behind it, why do we do it, why is it important, and so then each week I'm trying to present to you some different things like how do we create differentiated instruction around standards-based instruction. At the end of the course we're going to get to kind of how do we make it all work and what happens when we try to work with students and teachers and with students and parents and expecting different things. We're looking at diversity issues related to differentiation. There's just lots of themes that we can talk about, and so in planning the course, that's what I try to do is bring out some of those things so that as you meet with your small group, that you're having those discussions and you're really teasing those things apart. I believe that when you do that, then those things become naturally embedded into your practice and into the way that you are growing and learning. And as we talked about at the beginning of the semester, differentiation is not something that you do overnight or that you even do in a week, a month, or the semester. It's something that you begin working on and becomes a part of your teaching journey, if you will. So it's baby steps, doing a little bit at a time, and learning more about your practice and about the art of teaching. So having said all that, what you're going to do, you're tasked with creating a lesson plan that demonstrates that you know what you're doing. And part of that is embedded in our teacher accreditation process. So some of the standards that we have to meet as a teacher preparation program point to this very specific assignment. So this is a key assessment. Those of you who are seeking gifted endorsement, a huge amount of the standards that we have to address are addressed in this particular assignment. And so what those things require of us as your teachers is that you can demonstrate that you can do this, that you can take a classroom or a group or an individual and you can pull and cull different data pieces together and review them, analyze them, make some decisions regarding the best kind of instruction for those students, and then designing a lesson, implementing it, and then being able to reflect on it, what worked, what didn't work. So you know that process. That's what you do every day, right? Hopefully. But what this assignment does is make you really think about all the pieces to that. A lot of that is seamless in what you do every day, but this really points to helping to push you to really articulate what you're doing. So the first, the way the assignment works is it is in two parts. And the first installment, which is going to be due on the 29th, is the part where you create a student data report. And so what you're doing is you're really calculating what you know. So what is the setting of this of where this lesson is going to take place? Think of that in layers. So not just the classroom, but the school context, the student population, your school, if there are any district initiatives that this connects to, just kind of giving us those layers. Giving a good background so that I understand what you're doing. And then of course, for those of you who are middle school or high school or even elementary, you want to make sure that you talk about kind of where you are, like what unit you're in, what have you been studying, and those kinds of things, what you've some of this kind of bleeds over into the next section, which are the data pieces. So ideally, what I would like to see in this is a variety of data pieces. So you might have some, you may have given your students a pretest. I hope that you did, to know what they already know and where you're going to lead them, because that's going to, if you've got half of your class who already knows all of it, you're going to design experiences for those students to go further or deeper, right? You may have some testing information previous to this that lets you know, let's say you're doing math, and there's some things that you learned about your students in the last unit that connects to this unit. So that's observational data that's important for you to share, right? So you're going to have a mix of different kind of quantitative and qualitative pieces. You may have distributed at the beginning of the year some interest inventories to your students to get to know them, to know what they're interested in and what they like. That may play a part in what you're hoping to ultimately design for them. You may have likewise made some observations about how they work, the environment in which they work best, or the ways in which they work best. So that speaks to their learning style. So I think that all of those kind of pieces will be important. There might be parental information. Data pieces can be so wide. I would like to make sure to see definitely some quantitative and qualitative pieces. And then that evidence that's before you, because differentiation is all about the way in which you're assessing your students. That doesn't mean giving them lots of tests. The assessment system gets you information, and it leads you to what will meet their needs the best. So anyway, having said all that, a variety of data pieces, and you want to talk about that in your report. What did you gather? And then when you analyzed it, what did you learn about your students? So that analysis. Then you should conclude your analysis by talking about the direction for which you're going to go. So really kind of providing a rationale for what you're going to design. So, if you found that 50% of your class already knows, you may select, one of these particular differentiation strategies that we have right here. You may compact and accelerate them through, if it's, let's say, math. You want to accelerate them into some other things, go further. Maybe they're doing two-digit addition, with regrouping or whatever, and you're moving them on to 3- and 4-digit or whatever. You know how to do that best, but you need to be able to articulate what you're doing and why. I would ask that you use one of these differentiation strategies that I have here. These are ones that are used most often and that I feel like you really need to know what they are. So you'll notice that I didn't make an assignment where you had to define all these. But in doing this assignment, you will need to make yourself familiar with these different strategies. Okay, so whichever one that you select, you can see I even put it in bold, because I'll get people's assignments and they will have not told me what strategy that they're using, and define that strategy. Because even sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to use, a raft, and then they do it, but they don't really do it right. So I think it's really important to have that step in there to define it so that you really understand what it is, and then create your lesson using that strategy. There's tons of differentiation strategies. These are some of the most commonly used ones that I want you familiar with. If you find another differentiation strategy in your research or your, whatever you're doing to prepare this lesson, just run it by me, and I'm pretty sure if it's, if I recognize it and know that it's a good strategy, I'll be happy for you to use that. So then the next part of this is I want to see also in your rationale, I want to see that you're able, again, to articulate the why. So you have this data and you think that you want to design this lesson. I need to understand the connection, okay? And the language that you need to use in that report about the analysis are about the elements of differentiation and the student characteristics. So are you going to modify, are you going to differentiate the student's content, or the way in which they do it, the process? Are you going to modify the product or the way or the place in which they're learning? So those are the different elements of differentiation I want to hear you talking about in your analysis, your rationale for your lesson design. But I also need to hear about the characteristics of the students. So are you making this decision based on their readiness or their ability? So if you're accelerating, you're probably basing that on information that you've gathered that demonstrates, okay, they're ready to do something more or move further or deeper or whatever. Or maybe you have a reason for wanting to build upon student interest. Maybe you've gotten to the end of a unit. I mean, you've kind of taught them a lot. Maybe it's social studies. I'm just throwing that out there. And you really want to see them delve into some topics further within your larger context of your unit. Okay, and so you want to do that to engage them and help them learn some different skills through research and product development and things like that. But you want to do it vis-a-vis their interests. And so you will have gauged that through an interest survey or something you might have done at the beginning of the year. So anyway, I think you get the idea. I want you to be able to be using those elements and those student characteristics in your analysis. And then really the last thing is to write up the lesson. So, you want to have those major content standards in there that you're addressing, and everybody should be connecting that to content. But there may be other performance standards that you're really interested in. You may be really trying to work with, creative thinking or critical thinking. There might be some skill development that you are wanting the students to work with. And oftentimes that happens in different discipline areas. So let's say you're a English language arts teacher in high school. There might be specific literary elements that you're studying. You want to see how the kids can use that. So there's a blend of all of this going on together. So just make sure that I know what are the targets for the lesson. Talk about the environment. So what will this lesson, where will it be settled? This is the place to tell me about grouping. Have you designed this for a specific group of students or individuals, or kind of give me some of how it's going to look, this lesson, when you have designed it. And then any resources and materials that you will need to use, and then the step-by-step instructions of what you're going to ask the students to do. And also making sure that you follow back up with an assessment piece so that you know that your lesson was successful or not, right? So that's the first part, and that's really the hardest part. That's what you're working on right now. Most of you are teaching right now, and so you know your students pretty well. Those of you who've had to kind of seek a placement, I encourage you to make sure that you spend some time in those classrooms with those field experience teachers, just so you're not going in cold turkey and trying to teach a lesson. I mean, you can't really do the assignment unless you spend some time in the classroom observing the students, interacting with them, and having conversations with a mentor teacher who knows them best. Because ultimately, you probably, if you're in a placement, you're going to need to seek input from them to understand what to do best. So anyway, then you will deliver after October 29th. I'll take a week with your lessons there that first week of November, and be returning those to you as I do them. I'll try to do 4 or 5 a day and get them back to you, but I'll need that week to get through everyone's lesson, because I do spend a lot of time really looking at them and providing you a good amount of feedback, because I want you to be successful when you implement your lesson. So I would, let's see if I have the calendar here. So if you all turn them into me on the 29th, I should have them back to you by the 5th, so you can begin to look that week of the 6th, scheduling a time that would be November, this week, to schedule a time to implement your lesson, and then you'll have another week to either implement and or write that up, because that piece is going to be the second installment, where you are actually really reflecting on what you did, okay? So what this is going to ask you to do is kind of provide a summary of your experience, going back through those things that you prepared in your student data report, talking about, what happened with the setting, did good things happen, bad things, challenges rather, what about your role? What can you reflect on as far as the curriculum or content for what you designed? What did you notice about the students? All those different kinds of things you want to reflect on and provide a summation of the experience. And so there's summary and then there's reflection, and sometimes that happens together, but I want to make sure you know that I'm looking for both of those things in the second part of the lesson. So that's just kind of a good opportunity for me to talk through, and I think I provided lots and lots of examples for you. And there's not one perfect way to do this, but all of the exemplars that I uploaded into our course site provide some different examples of what would be a good differentiated lesson plan, both part 1 and part 2. So it's a lot of hard work, but I think it's a great lesson for you to really flesh out and do this idea of differentiated instruction really well, so that you understand that it's really a way of thinking that leads into your way of responding and designing learning experiences. So any questions, just let me know, and I will look forward to receiving those on the 29th. Thanks, everybody.